The declaration arrived on a Tuesday. Not that the timing mattered much to anyone on Earth. Tuesday had a particular quality to it, too far from the weekend to feel hopeful, too close to Monday to feel recovered. Humans had been fighting Tuesdays long before the stars had opinions about them. The transmission came through every diplomatic frequency simultaneously, a galaxy-wide broadcast of imperial crimson and gold, Emperor Kael'zar's voice resonating across 17 star systems with the kind of authority that had made entire civilizations weep in surrender before the message even finished loading. Hear me, inhabitants of the Sol System. By the eternal decree of the Galactic Empire, humanity is hereby declared an enemy of civilized space. You have 72 of your planetary rotations to submit unconditionally, or face total annihilation. The might of 10,000 warships stands ready to reduce your world to cooling ash. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. The message ended with a thunderclap of bass frequencies designed specifically to trigger fear responses in carbon-based nervous systems. On Earth, the translation software processed it in about 4 seconds. Then a junior analyst at the UN monitoring station in Geneva looked at the readout, blinked twice, and said, "Huh." She forwarded it to her supervisor and went to get coffee. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened 41 hours later, which was actually considered extremely fast by bureaucratic standards. Admiral Darian Voss attended via secure link from her flagship, the UESS Relentless, currently parked in a repair dock above Luna because 2 of its primary drives had developed what the engineering crew lovingly called the shutters. She had short-cropped silver hair, a permanent crease between her brows from 40 years of squinting at tactical displays, and a mug of black coffee that she had not yet touched because it was still too hot. "Let me understand," said the council chairman, a broad-shouldered man named Petrov who perpetually looked like he hadn't slept enough. "The Galactic Empire has declared war on us." "That is correct," said Voss. "And their fleet consists of approximately 10,000 warships, yes. Their smallest vessel is about 4 kilometers long. Their flagship, the Eternal Sovereign, is the size of a small moon." Voss finally sipped her coffee. "It's quite impressive, honestly." Petrov stared at her. "Admiral, should we be more alarmed?" Voss considered the question seriously, the way she considered all questions that fell within her professional domain. She set down her mug. "Councilman, I've been reading everything we have on the Galactic Empire. Their last major war was 300 years ago against the Vreth Collective. The Vreth had 40,000 ships and surrendered in 6 weeks." She paused. "The Vreth did not have us." The room was quiet. "We've had 70 years of continuous warfare," Voss continued. "Resource wars, the lunar conflict, the Mars sovereignty crisis, 3 separate AI uprisings, the Antarctic territorial disputes, the brief but memorable Robot Bee incident of 2087, she waved her hand, point being, we did not stop fighting long enough to learn peace. We just got better at fighting." She picked up her coffee again. "The Empire's 10,000 warships have never encountered anything that shot back seriously. Ours have been shooting at each other since before any of us were born." Another silence. "So your assessment is?" Petrov pressed. Admiral Darian Voss smiled. It was not a comfortable smile to be on the receiving end of. "Tell Emperor Kael'zar he can have his 72 hours. We'll need about 30 of them to finish fixing the relentless drives." The Empire's advanced scouts arrived at the edge of the Sol System 68 hours into the deadline, presumably expecting to find panicked radio transmissions, desperate diplomatic overtures, or the beautiful silence of a civilization already in the process of collective surrender. What they found instead was Admiral Voss waiting. Not with the full human fleet that was still assembling, which was actually its own kind of terrifying because it implied there was more coming, but with Carrier Group 7, 11 ships of various classes, all of them bearing the kind of asymmetrical burn marks and patch-welded hull plating that suggested these vessels had seen things. Scout Commander Vreeth of the Empire opened a channel expecting either pleading or silence. What he got was a human voice, utterly calm, saying, "You're 4 hours early." We weren't quite done with breakfast. "This is," Vreeth began. "I know who you are," said Voss. "You're the advance element. Sensor profile matches what our people pulled from the Kepler relay stations. 17 ships. Cruiser class, mostly. Your captain's name is Vreeth, and you've never actually fired your weapons at anything that moved." A pause. "I have." Vreeth's translator took a moment to fully parse the implication. "You dare threaten an Imperial?" "I'm not threatening you," Voss said, and she sounded genuinely patient, like a teacher correcting a minor grammatical error. "I'm informing you. There's a difference. A threat implies uncertainty. I'm just describing what happens next if your fleet crosses marker buoy Delta 9. She sent coordinates. We've mined everything behind it. Not the fancy kind of mines your combat doctrine assumes, either. The kind we invented when we were fighting ourselves and needed things to die specifically and efficiently." There was a long pause from Vreeth's ship. "Your species cannot possibly." "Scout Commander." Voss's voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. I want you to transmit something back to Emperor Kaelzer for me. Tell him, humanity accepts his declaration of war. Tell him we're not surrendering. Tell him that in the last 70 years, we have fought 47 major armed conflicts on our own planet alone, and none of them ended because one side ran out of will." She let that land. "And then tell him that the admiral he's dealing with finished third in her class at the War College, which means there are people out here smarter than me. The scout fleet did not cross marker buoy Delta 9. Emperor Kaelzer received the transmission in his throne room, surrounded by advisors who had spent their careers telling him what he wanted to hear. He watched the human admiral's face on the screen. Watched the complete, almost boring confidence in her eyes. The way she held her coffee cup like she was on a morning commute, not staring down the advance element of a civilization-ending armada. "They are bluffing," said his first advisor. "Are they?" said Kaelzer. It was not quite a question. He pulled up the intelligence files his analysts had compiled. Conflict records spanning 7 decades. Weapon systems designed by people who had tested them on each other. A species that had looked at its own capacity for war and, rather than finding it monstrous, had simply refined it. Categorized it. Built academies around it. They had a college. Specifically for war. And the admiral who was currently drinking coffee while his advance fleet retreated had finished third. "Get me their diplomatic channel," he said quietly. His first advisor blinked. "Your Imperial Majesty, surely you don't intend to." "The Vreth surrendered in 6 weeks, Kaelzer said." He thought about Admiral Voss's eyes. The complete absence of bluster in them. The terrifying authenticity of someone who simply knew what she was capable of. These are not the Vreth. The ceasefire negotiations began 11 days later. Admiral Darian Voss attended via the same secure link, the Relentless now fully repaired and, she had been quietly informed, the most heavily armed vessel currently in sensor range of the conference point. She still had the coffee mug. Emperor Kaelzer, appearing via holographic projection in his full imperial regalia, studied the human woman for a long moment. "You were prepared to fight," he said. "Against odds that have broken every civilization we have encountered." Voss tilted her head slightly. "We didn't see odds," she said. "We saw a problem." "And if we had attacked?" She considered this honestly. "It would have been bad," she admitted. "For everyone." She looked at him steadily. "Mostly for you, though." Kaelzer was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, the Galaxy Empire ruler, conqueror of 40 worlds, sovereign of 17 systems, whose name was spoken in whispers across civilized space, leaned back in his throne. "Tell me," he said, with the careful curiosity of a man who had just realized he'd nearly stepped off a cliff in the dark, "how does humanity wish to proceed?" Admiral Darian Voss set down her coffee cup. She smiled. Glad you asked. The treaty was signed on a Thursday. Nobody on Earth paid particularly close attention. There was a transit strike in Sao Paulo and a very interesting football match. The galaxy, however, took careful notes.